every week. This seems to work. It's the magic of television. I don't know how it works. I don't know why we're here. But when we run out of, oh, there's the Hell's Angels just went by. This is a weird, really weird show on legendary Andy Kaufman. We're going to get into it on multiple levels. This thing is complicated, so please bear with me because there's a lot of levels to this particular character. I don't know if anybody ever figured out Andy Kaufman, but we will try. That's all we could do. I know quite a bit about him, not everything, but just really one of the most fascinating performers in the history of comedy. Again, we're going to get into it. I don't know if anybody's ever figured out what made this guy tick, but I'm going to give it my shot for what it's worth. But to get that, you're going to have to subscribe. And to subscribe, you have to actually do something. You know, I don't know what it is, but you have to do something to subscribe. And then I'll love you. Because it'll put some money into the hopper. Don't boo me because I said the word money. I don't think that really matters. Okay, well, it was a Bronx cheer, so I guess you're turning on me at this point. But if please like and subscribe with great fanfare so we can get on with the show, which is explosive, and I think you'll enjoy it. Oh, but first we have a sponsor that I did want to talk about, which is Biltong USA, one of the great biltongs in the entire USA. This is the king of the biltongs, Anton Biltong. Comes from a long line of biltongs. Maybe it's his last name. I don't know. I would change my last name to Biltong if I was him, legally. You know, then you could really own the space completely on the internet that you are Anton Biltong. This is my favorite flavor. I don't even know if you call them flavors, but this is helping me get through the playoffs. Now, we've only had a short time in the playoffs, but I've loaded it up for bear, getting ready for this nervous week of baseball, eventually leading to the Fall Classic, as many of you know. It's just a really, really weird hodgepodge of teams this year, but we'll see what happens. But this pure protein, like a filet mignon of beef jerky, can get me through these games, which are, I'd rather eat this than to eat potato chips and carbohydrates, you know, if you know what I mean, because later on you need a lot of protein and you need a lot of fiber. I've learned two things I've learned in the past couple of years. You need protein and you need tons of fiber. That being said, this is the protein part. And then they've got those cereals, Fiber One or whatever, but we're not really into that, Raisin Bran or whatever you guys are into. But this thing here is so delicious. If Andy was alive, he'd probably be eating it, but he's not, so he can't. But I am, so I will, which is what I recommend to you. And to start you off on the trip, take a little piece. Don't take the whole hit of acid. Use the secret code MarkG, which gives you 10% off, and you will get delivered to your door this incredible bag of the greatest beef jerky, which is, I'm just using American terms. Biltong is not exactly beef jerky, but it is incredible. Try it. You'll like it. One bag comes with ice on a bag in a box, right to your door. FedEx, whole normal thing, tiny little box. No one will know what's in there. Even the dogs can't smell it because it's sealed in like another silver pouch that you have to open up inside the box. But a lot of different flavors. This is my favorite flavor. Look at all of them. A lot of people know about this. I came late to the party, but now I'm into it. Viva turned me on to it. A guy named David Freiheit out of the great state of Florida. Okay, let's get on with the proceeding because this Commander K, thank you, Commander Cody. We like him. We like him a lot. Andy Kaufman. Yeah, Andy Kaufman is up there with the and right in the middle of the 70s comedy boom, and he's older than the rest. Because he's born in 1949, and in fact, like he comes before Robin Williams. Robin Williams, yeah, this is him performing, Andy, at a very early age. Great Neck is where he resides. Great Neck, Long Island is a very wealthy community to this day on the North Shore of Long Island. There's a lot of wealthy people up there, and it was, in a way, before there was the move to the West Coast by celebrities in film business. Great Neck was, if people could wrap their minds around this, the Beverly Hills of the East Coast. Every show person lived in Great Neck. This is in the 20s and 30s and 40s. When it does move west, Beverly Hills will become Beverly Hills. Now, this is Andy. Looks like a Gerber baby here. I mean, these photos are so incredible. But as odd as this sounds, by the age of 4, his parents were already taking him to shrinks. He has a brother. He's the oldest, and he has a brother, Michael, a sister, Carol. This is another shot of Andy. His father has a business. This is his grandfather. Now, his grandfather, Papu, is going to play an interesting part in this story. His grandfather started this costume jewelry business, and I don't mean like junk costume jewelry. Up until, I want to say, Audrey Hepburn and Jackie Kennedy, that was the end of the costume jewelry business. And maybe some of the older ladies know what I'm talking about, because those two women refused to embellish themselves with costume jewelry, which was predominant and a huge industry in the West, not the West, I mean, Western civilization, Europe and the United States, up until the 60s. I mean, like stuff all over you that was costume jewelry. And today it's perceived as junk jewelry, but it wasn't back then. Today, the real jewelry has replaced costume jewelry for the most part, and is a badge of honor and a demonstration of wealth. But back then, costume jewelry ruled the earth. And this grandfather here started a business, and his son, who's Andy's father, was a salesman. This is his father. His father, at the end of World War II, marries Janice here. I think it was Janice Bernstein, and she was a print model in magazines in New York, Parade magazine, New York Times magazine, those types of magazines, modeling clothing and stuff of that nature. He got, I want to say, 3 Purple Hearts for landing on the beach in Normandy and getting shot up. There's some details about how he got shot up. One was a German prisoner of his stepped on a mine, and he got part of that shrapnel shot. But an incredible war hero. The father comes back from World War II and gets to this huge house in Great Neck, Long Island, and the business expands, and he's on the road all the time selling this costume jewelry. I don't mean he's selling it out of his car. He's selling it to different franchised jewelry stores around the country, and like that kind of a salesman situation. But oddly enough, the grandfather, who Andy is the apple in the eye of. Here he is. Here's a picture of the grandfather. The grandfather dies of cancer, and instead of telling Andy that his grandfather has died, they tell him that he's gone away on a trip. This completely backfires psychologically, because Andy sits by his bedroom window, catatonically staring out, waiting for his grandfather to come home, which he never does. That's why he was sent to psychiatrists, because they did this to him. The parents admitted years later that they should have simply told him that he had passed away, or whatever, vernacular they wanted to use to explain it, because Andy felt as a kid that his grandfather didn't love him and left him behind on whatever imaginary trip his parents went on. So this thing kind of backfires, and he stays in his room and becomes isolated in his room. putting on imaginary TV shows for kids, including himself. He has an entire, yeah, this is him about three, 2 or 3. But at the age of 9, 1958, I don't even know how to explain this, so I'm just going to explain it. He puts up signs at the local supermarkets saying he's available to perform at children's parties. And he creates a TV show in his bedroom. He becomes a make-believe Dick Clark. Keep in mind, they have a black nanny, which is another sign of wealth in this time. But he's 9 in 1958, so he's not even into the 1960s yet. He really is a performer and a character that bridges 2 generations. This is Andy at 13. Now, Andy at 13 has a bar mitzvah, and the bar mitzvah is held, of course, at the most unusual place you could possibly hold a bar mitzvah, the Copacabana in New York, as shown in Goodfellas. The Copacabana, because the parents have money, and this is traditional now out here in Beverly Hills now, but this is like, 1964. He has Paul Anka, the legendary songman, singing at his bar mitzvah. I didn't have that. Mine was at the Huntington Townhouse, and we didn't have any entertainment. Yeah, this is the religious part of the bar mitzvah here with a shul. But the party itself, where you saw him dancing, that was oddly enough at the actual Copacabana in Manhattan. At 14, he begins to start putting on these parties, or as like I said, entertaining children with really advanced parties that he puts on with Little Rascal clips and puppets and Howdy Doody marionettes. He actually is getting paid for this, to do this, and he doesn't allow any adults into the parties because he wants to be the adult entertainment figure in these parties. It's just not so easy to explain. But this is all around Great Neck, where he lives. This is all his, younger people, not the same age. In other words, he's like 14 and they're like 7. And he's putting on these parties, but at the same time, he's writing short stories, he's writing poetry, including a novel. And in high school, he begins to take a lot of drugs. He hooks up with a group, they call themselves F Troop, after the TV show. And they have long hair, they smoke weed, they take acid, they take DMT, they take STP. Here's a picture of them. This is, I want to say 1966. This is his F Troop. That's Andy on the extreme right. These are not kids who are just doing this for fun. These are some juvenile delinquents. They get involved in a lot of different nefarious things, get arrested a couple of times. Andy runs away from home. He's living in a park in Great Neck. He does, by his own admission and their admission, a lot of acid and a lot of drugs at the age of 16 or 17. And I think this may have had a profound effect on him mentally. I don't know about artistically, because he does stop taking everything on November 20th, 1968. He literally cuts out everything. But I think some damage may have been done, especially from the acid. So, like Rebel with a Cause, he begins to fight with his father. And his father can't figure out. I mean, look at it from his father's point of view. I mean, everybody had this. I had this. A lot of people had this. You see it in Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean. You see the fight with his dad as the centerpiece of the movie. And that movie came out of, in that era. And obviously, Andy saw that movie. He reads On the Road by Jack Kerouac, and he reads it over and over and over again. And one day his father comes into his room trying to figure out what is wrong with this kid, finds the book and begins reading the portion that Kerouac wrote about trouble with his father. And the father begins sobbing, realizing that the problem with Andy is him, that he can't communicate with his own dad. And Andy comes into the room and finds his father on his knees by his bed, reading and sobbing on the Road by Jack Kerouac. And Andy joins him and he starts sobbing, reading the same paragraph with his dad, the same pages with his dad. And they kind of bond over this sobbing Jack Kerouac on the road encounter. He gets a girl pregnant in school. The girl has the baby. I think he's 17, she's 16. They put it up for adoption. Later, this girl will find him many years later, like 18 or 15 years later. But in 1967, a year later, he graduates from Great Neck High School, and all of his friends are going off to college, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. So he takes the year off. And what does he do? He starts delivering meat for the local butcher. And two of the people who are customers, one is the legendary comic Alan King, who I knew because I produced the first ever New York City Toyota Comedy Festival with Alan King, who was a show business god. He lived in Kings Point and had a huge mansion with a swimming pool. And Andy befriended intentionally, according to Alan King's son. And Andy befriended Alan King's son, not for Alan King's son, but to meet Alan King repeatedly. And I don't know if we have a picture of Alan King for people who don't know, the great legendary Alan King. I think he was on Ed Sullivan's show 100 times or something. One of the great machine gun style comics of the 50s and 60s. Thanks, 10. Yeah, King was a legend. And he was a legend when I did that Toyota Comedy Festival with him in New York. I think it was 1991. And that's how I met Jerry Lewis. That's how I met Buddy Hackett. Just an insane story. Maybe we'll just do an episode on that comedy festival. But I was partners with Alan King. And anyway, so Andy Kaufman befriends his son. And when he came to the house to deliver meat from the butcher, all he wanted to do was meet Alan King. And when he meets Alan King, he starts talking to him about showbiz. And Alan King doesn't like this. And he calls the butcher and he says, "Get rid of this kid. He keeps bothering me about show business, that he wants me to introduce him to people." And Alan King's trying to chill out. He allows his friends, Andy Kaufman, this F Troop group, into Alan King's pool repeatedly, and they party there and shred the place. And Alan King has had it. In the backyard, they had a full bar with a beer and beer tap that all of these maniac teens would just party and drink from. Police got involved. At one point, Andy Kaufman runs away from home. He's gone for weeks. Where is he? He's up in Boston. He comes back on the train. His father's flipping out. His mother's flipping out. They pick him up at the train. His father picks him up, starts yelling at him. He jumps out of a moving car and runs back into the park where he lives in the park. He lives in this park in Great Neck. The police know who he is. They know who his father is, so they don't really hassle him. And his friends are living in the park. They're living in the bushes doing drugs. A year later, he goes to this college, this 2-year college named Graham Junior College in Boston. It's no longer around, but he studies TV production there. And he begins to put on little TV shows. And one of the TV shows he puts on is just to show you the roots of his artistic stuff. He does a parody talk show where he's sitting on a panel as a guest after doing some stand-up on this show, this talk show, and he pulls out a gun and threatens to off himself with the gun. And as he's about to pull the trigger, the host of this talk show dives onto him, and they cut to commercial, and they come back. and everything is restored. So it was a parody of a attempt to delete himself as comedy, and this becomes the style of comedy that he will embrace. These hoaxes, these fake outs, these violations of the fourth wall. He creates Uncle Andy's Funhouse, which is a 15-minute version of what he did as a kid. Also, this is all part of the college TV station. And he meets his roommate is some Iranian student who has an accent that Andy borrows with permission from this guy, and this becomes the immigrant character, thank you very much, of later years. The guy actually gave him permission to use the accent that would become Latka Gravas, famously on Taxi years later. Yeah, he stays at this college, but in the college, it becomes apparent that one of the things Andy has is OCD, and he washes his hands 12 times a day. He What else does he do? He walks around his car, which he didn't have yet, but he walks around his car 3 times after it's parked. All this ritualistic OCD stuff will be with him the rest of his life. He had a different toothbrush for each day of the week. Sunday, he didn't have a toothbrush. He took the day off from brushing. When he boarded a plane, he always boarded the plane with his right foot first. Not that that meant anything. It's just the ritualistic part of OCD. And of course, he flossed internally with a 15-foot string of cheesecloth that he would eat and eventually pull out of his rear end, flossing internally, which had been depicted, in case anybody wants to see it, in the movie Crumb. It was his brother who actually did it in that movie. I don't know what it didn't have anything to do with the movie, but it's in Crumb, as some people may know. I want to say 69, it becomes apparent that there is only one God in the universe for Andy Kaufman, and that's Elvis Presley. It was Fabian, but it becomes Elvis Presley. And he has written this novel. As I said, he wants to give it to Elvis Presley. And he, as odd as this sounds, in 1969, so he's like, I don't know, like 19, he hitchhikes to Vegas and he goes into the International Hotel where Elvis is performing. And he hides in the kitchen, not unlike Sirhan, and hides in a cupboard. He was able to fit inside this closet because he realized that Elvis did not go through the main ballroom, that he came down from a service elevator, and he stalks him to realize what the route is, and he hides in this cupboard, and sure enough, they're coming down the service elevator, entering the kitchen, is Elvis Presley with his Memphis Mafia with Sonny and Red, and he jumps out of the closet, the pantry, and he says, I am your biggest fan. I want to give you a copy of my novel, which is called God, ironically. And Elvis, Sonny and Red pull out their guns, and Elvis goes, you can put him away. He's all right, And he says to Elvis, I'm going to be famous just like you. And Elvis, to his credit, goes, I know that's true, boy. And he puts his hand on Andy Kaufman's shoulder and then continues through the pantry to do a show at the International Hotel. Well, to Andy Kaufman, this is like he's been touched by the hand of God. And he cannot get over this for the rest of his life, that he perceives Elvis as passing on his fame and power to Andy Kaufman. And in 1971, he begins to do comedy in New York, and he has an uncle named Sam Denoff. Now, I got to tell you who Sam Denoff is, because this is pretty important. He begins to do an Elvis Presley impersonation, which, unlike today, there weren't that many people doing this. and he did it impeccably, like many of you have seen. This was not a joke at the time. Nobody was doing this. Years later, when Elvis passed away in '77, after that, everybody was an Elvis. There were Elvis impersonator midgets. There were fat ones. I went to a dentist in Beverly Hills once. An Indian guy came out and he says, "Do you think I want to do this?" I go, "I don't know." He says, "This was not my dream." I go, "What was your dream?" And he comes back with framed photos of himself in India. He says, "I was the biggest Elvis impersonator in India. That's why I came here to Hollywood." So everybody had this bug all over the world. The guy was the worst dentist in the world. I said, "Just shoot me up with Novocaine enough so I can get to Tijuana." But that's a story for another day. Andy was an impeccable mimic, and an impeccable musician, and an impeccable Elvis impersonator. And people began to see him perform in Catch a Rising Star, and also My Father's Place in Roslyn, Long Island, and Pips and some other joints. And he has an uncle. Now it's not really his uncle. It is the best friend of his father's brother. And the guy's name is Sam Denoff. I don't know if you have a picture of this guy. He's got like a shirt and tie on, he's got like a headshot, if you could find that photo. Sam Denoff was a comedy legend. He had created a show called The Dick Van Dyke Show, and was one of the top comedy writers in Hollywood. And he was also partners with a guy named Carl Reiner, another obscure legend. So Carl Reiner sees him, Andy, perform, and Carl Reiner also flips out. And Carl Reiner introduces Andy to his own nephew, a guy named George Shapiro, who is Carl Reiner's manager and a young fledgling manager. So George Shapiro is now been brought into, he's managing Carl Reiner, but he begins to look at Andy Kaufman, and that, well, this is this is a little later on, but I'll address this now. This is the host of the Match Game, where Andy Kaufman went on as a himself and didn't understand the rules of the Match Game, was asking all kinds of crazy questions, comes out and meets the girl, doesn't know why he lost, and it's really surreal. He tried to get on Hollywood Squares, but they got too antsy about it. The Match Game thing is really awkward. If you can find that on video on YouTube, watch that, because it's very surreal what he tries to do. But by 1972, Andy is becoming a hit in New York. And when I say hit, I mean he is bringing all his props to Catch a Rising Star. Rick Newman is running Catch a Rising Star on the Upper East Side. That becomes Andy's headquarters. He in college, this African conga player, Babatunde, who is world famous, came and performed at Andy's college, and Andy became enamored with conga drums and became an expert conga drum player. And he would do that in his act, playing these drums. Also fading one art form into another. He would go from this foreign man character into Elvis. And it was almost the exact same thing that Dice did a couple of years later with the Nutty Professor becoming John Travolta in Grease. If you saw the Dice episode that I did, this became the performance thing that put Dice on the map. The foreign man, which would later become Latka, turning into Elvis, is what put Andy Kaufman on the comedy map. The same as the Nutty Professor. Yeah, this is he he brought on these three like Black Panthers, or these heavyweight hardcore street black dudes from Harlem to play congas with him, who looked like the most threatening group of men you've ever seen in your life. And that was intentional. They had different Black Panther stickers on, patches on their coats and stuff. This was later for his specials. He has not been on TV at this point in the story. Okay, so he begins to, this is such a complicated long life. In 1973, he meets a guy who becomes his collaborator, and that guy is Bob Zmuda. Bob Zmuda, if I can explain this guy properly, is a guy from Chicago who was part of a guerrilla theater group and worshipped Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin politically, but had a guerrilla theater group that did street theater in Chicago. And you say, well, what the hell is street theater? Okay, I'll give you some examples of Bob Zmuda. He would get like 20 members of the group. They'd go to the Chicago Zoo and start running as fast as they could in a big crowd, yelling, "The lions are loose, run for your life." Now, think about the chaos that would ensue when they did that. That's what they were into. That was the street theater. They would get on city buses, like 8 of them, on a packed city bus, and spread out, begin coughing, and then someone would yell, "Poison gas, run for it." And the 8 of them would bolt from the bus, and so would everybody else, including the people running from the lions. This may be Bob Zmuda, maybe Andy Kaufman. We don't know. What we do know is this is Tony Clifton. Tony Clifton is a character based on a guy named Norman Wexler, who hires Tony Clifton, begins to become one of the workers at the Improv in New York for Bud Friedman. He's a bartender there. And he teams up with a guy named Chris Albrecht, and they have like a comedy duo. They're struggling actors. Bob Zmuda comes to New York as a struggling actor. Chris Albrecht, who will later become the head of HBO, create The Sopranos, HBO comedy, boxing, everything that HBO was created by Chris Albrecht. But at this point, Chris Albrecht is living in the back of a theater with Bob Zmuda, sleeping on the floor in New York. And Zmuda is a bartender, as is Chris Albrecht. And when Bud Friedman opens the Improv out on Melrose in LA, he turns over the place to Chris Albrecht, who becomes the manager of the Improv. Zmuda will hook up with Andy Kaufman, and they have this incredible prankster hoaxing sensibility regarding a type of art form that's conceptual, to say the least. Performance art may be an easier way to swallow it, but conceptual art is probably what it was, because Andy Kaufman was not a stand-up comic, despite what people think. He was a conceptual artist. In fact, when he meets Andy Warhol, the two of them bond over Howdy Doody, and they kind of hit it off because both of them are conceptual, weird artists. He doesn't really engage with all the other comics who were there at the time. Belzer, Richard Lewis said that he was there and everybody felt protective of him. Billy Crystal was there, Robin Williams was there, Belzer was there, Richard Lewis, but they couldn't really communicate with him. In fact, there was a story. Here he is with Robin. Robin becomes a young protege of Kaufman, but he can't figure out Kaufman. And Robin will go on to eclipse Kaufman's career, but follows it pretty closely. And what I mean is it's almost a parallel career. A number of years later, he will be an alien from another planet in a sitcom. Kaufman will be an alien type foreign man in a sitcom called Taxi. But right now, at this particular time, Andy, in 1974, he's with Zmuda, and they've created this character named Tony Clifton. Now, who is Tony Clifton? Tony Clifton is a character for Andy to portray, who is the nastiest nightclub singer in the history of Las Vegas. And it is some people believed he had dual personalities. There was a psychiatrist who said that Tony Clifton allowed Andy, who was the sweetest, nicest guy in the world, by the way, to become this complete, arrogant, nasty son of a bitch named Tony Clifton, who offended everyone. And Tony Clifton drank Jack Daniels, smoked cigarettes like a chimney, and ate steaks, while Andy Kaufman was a vegetarian, a teetotaler, and didn't smoke anything anymore because he was into TM. This this is one of the episodes where they performed with showgirls. They staged the most incredible stuff together. And we'll get into this Zmuda Tony Clifton thing, because Clifton will be on the David Letterman show, and everyone thinks it's Andy, and it's not. It's Bob Zmuda. This is Bob Zmuda, by the way. This is not Andy Kaufman. In fact, Morton, the producer, once asked Bob Zmuda how many times he appeared as Andy Kaufman as Tony Clifton, and Morton was shocked when Zmuda told him it was him every single time. Okay, and he was extremely obnoxious, this character, on purpose, but it was hard to take for any length of time. So they begin to plan all of these crazy hijinks theater events. This one will be later from Taxi, which we'll get to in a couple of seconds. But right now, Andy decides to go to Switzerland in 1974 to attend an advanced transcendental meditation training seminar. TM, for people who don't know, is a meditation technique. But this official TM thing was run by the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who George Harrison had seen. The Beatles had gone to see him. And he was holding court in Switzerland. There he is right there. This was the guru that Andy Kaufman worshipped. And a lot of people felt it was a cult. And Andy went to Switzerland to learn how to levitate, not meditate, levitate. It was on the cover of Time magazine that year. And people were, not Andy, but other people who had already been there said they were able to sit in a lotus position and meditate a few inches off the ground. Some people 3 or 4 feet, some people able to maneuver around a room. So Andy wanted to get a part of this and flew to Switzerland for months, disappears. Zmuda doesn't know where he is, but he knows that he's in Switzerland at this retreat. And he comes back, and Zmuda says, can you do it? And he says, yeah. And he said, let me see you. And he said, no. He said, why? He says, because to do it, I'd have to be abstinent for a year, and I'm not willing to do it. I learned how to do it. He said, but I'm not willing to be abstinent and without any sex or anything for a year to do it. And Zmuda just said, nah, you're full of shit. Because they were constantly faking each other out, these two guys, right? Okay, so comes back to New York. Andy Kaufman is shipped out to the Melrose Improv by Bud Friedman, who wants him to help launch the Melrose Improv because the Comedy Store, which is being run by Mitzi Shore, is dominating the earth out here. And Friedman wants a part of that action, that money. So he sends out Andy Kaufman, and people begin to see Andy Kaufman from Hollywood. And they're stunned because in New York, everybody knows him, and he's a sensation in New York. There's no doubt about it. He's killing it in New York. 1974, he debuts on national TV for the first time. It was the Dean Martin's Comedy World. And on that show, he does what's now become a legendary bit, the Mighty Mouse bit. I don't know if you have a picture of him as Mighty Mouse with the record player. It wasn't him as Mighty Mouse. And this is Andy lip syncing the Mighty Mouse theme song, Here I Come to Save the Day. And this is something he did at the kids' parties where he would lip sync certain segments being played on a record player. I don't know if you have that photo of him next to a record player, but we saw him do this a bunch of times on Saturday Night Live and other venues. But this is the first time he's done anything like this on national TV. And a lot of people see him do that. And some of the people who saw him do it, one of the guys was a guy named Dick Ebersol. And Dick Ebersol was from NBC Sports. And he was recently hired to do a show called Saturday Night Live. And he was looking for talent working for Lorne Michaels. And he stumbles in there and he, quote unquote, discovers, for what it's worth, Andy Kaufman on the West Coast. And he arranges for Andy Kaufman to be on the original episode of Saturday Night Live, October 11th, 1975, for those who remember. And you could hear a drop in the city when Saturday Night Live was on TV, by the way, in New York. There was no sound outside the city, on the streets, because everyone was inside watching it on television. One of the things they saw was Andy doing Mighty Mouse with his record player. Here I come to save the day. Na, 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 na. And that becomes a huge hit on SNL. And they don't know how to deal with him because they don't want to put him as a cast member. They don't really want to use him in sketches. So they decide to use him interstitially over a period of weeks and months. He makes a number of appearances on SNL. And in early 1976, he picks up and moves to Hollywood because that's where the action is for TV. And September 20th, 1976, begins 10 shows on NBC. Let's take a look at this picture here, by the way. Oh, yeah, this is a picture of him doing Mighty Mouse, the theme song from Mighty Mouse. He will then do The Foreign Man on SNL. He will then kill with Elvis. You know, again, the transition from Foreign Man to Elvis, like I said, the Nutty Professor to John Travolta in Grease, probably stolen by Dice, but nevertheless effective. So he moves out to Hollywood. He does the Van Dyke and Company. This is Dick Van Dyke. Now, why is he doing Dick Van Dyke? It's because of his uncle, Sam Denoff, and it's because of Carl Reiner, and it's because of George Shapiro. This troika will surround him for the rest of his life. He doesn't really make it on his own. He does make a certain amount of celebrity noise on his own, but without these three guys, it would have been a longer road for Andy Kaufman, I think, and not the same road. But these three big shots, you know, maybe they knew what they were seeing was unbelievable talent, and to their credit, you know, they signed him up. But in 1976, late 76, he does his first Tonight Show. And I think Johnny wasn't there. Steve Allen was sitting in. And Steve Allen broke a lot of talent. He broke Lenny Bruce. And he did a lot of things with the Tonight Show. But I think he was the guest host that night. And then January 21st. Oh, yeah, this is him on the Dick Van Dyke Show. That's Lucille Ball. Yeah. Wow, that's a great shot. Look at that innocent baby, Andy. 1976 Andy. So he's 27 at that point. January 21st, 1977, he does his first Tonight Show with Johnny. And he reads the children's book, Dick and Jane, out loud as part of his performance. And this just kills Johnny. He just starts laughing so hard he can't take it, Johnny Carson. In fact, at one point, I think Andy stumbles on a word and Johnny yells it out, what the actual word is from the desk. Johnny Carson loved Andy Kaufman up until a point. And that point was March 3rd, 1977, a year later, where Andy breaks character from, I think, The Foreign Man and starts talking normally as part of the bit. And once he broke character, Johnny Carson did not want him back any longer. Johnny Carson didn't get the joke. It was far too conceptual, too hip, too inside for Carson, who was a man of TV and show business structure, to understand what Kaufman was doing, and he didn't like it. But somebody else comes in and sees him who does like it, and that's the future producers of a show called Taxi. And on September 12, 1978, Taxi is launched, and it's not launched easily. Because in the contract negotiations, now keep in mind, he's got these heavy hitters behind him, Andy Kaufman. If he was a regular comic trying to cut a deal, this would have been easy peasy. But what Andy Kaufman demands is that he only wants to work a couple of days, and it's not out of laziness. He just doesn't like sitcoms, and he wants a separate contract for Tony Clifton. He wants Clifton written into the script. The producers flip out. They just go, we don't even know what you're talking about. And he says, I have to have Tony Clifton, the character, in like 2 episodes or 4. And they got it down to 1 or 2 in the negotiations that Clifton would actually be a character in Taxi. And he will play, I think, Danny DeVito's brother, who's harsher than Danny DeVito and came from Vegas as a lounge singer. Now, nobody in this crew gets what Andy Kaufman is doing. Danza doesn't get it. Jeff Conway is already an alcoholic. He will punch Andy Kaufman in the face in a fight at an after party and continue to pummel his face, drunk out of his mind. Conway saying that Andy disrespected us. We don't get you. We don't like you. Mary Lou Henner will be supportive and friendly, and she will never forget any single event of Taxi, because as she told me, she has that memory thing where she remembers every single thing in her life as if it was a photo and an audio tape. And I said, are you going to remember me? And she said, unfortunately, yes, jokingly, at a party. But Mary Lou Henner, what's his name over there? Judd Hirsch. The only one who got it was Danny DeVito, and he will later become the producer of the movie Man on the Moon with Jim Carrey, because he got what Andy was about. The rest of them didn't, and it created an incredible amount of friction. Andy had a photographic memory. He didn't have to rehearse. He saw the script, photographed the script in his mind, came out, never flubbed a line ever in rehearsals, and was just bored of doing the rehearsals. So in his contract, he had, and this is all his contracts, not just the Taxi contract, he had a contractual obligation to meditate before every single event. The taping, the rehearsal, the actual show, whatever it was, he had a room with a sign on the door saying, do not interrupt, I am meditating. Now, I don't know if he was levitating or meditating or what, but the cast of Taxi didn't like him. And he was as lovable as you can imagine. They just couldn't understand what the guy was doing. You know, on this show, he was making a fortune. The show goes to #1. He's getting paid a lot of money. And the only reason he's doing it is to get the money to put on the crazy shows that he wants to put on. And he does eventually put them on. And the show that, to get back to Taxi for a second, just to finish up this thing on Taxi, they get to the Tony Clifton show. And Tony Clifton shows up, and it's not Tony Clifton, it's Bob Zmuda, and he shows up with 2 prostitutes. And that photo, I mean, if you could go back to that photo with the black line on the girl's eyes, the reason there's a black line on those girls' eyes is because Tony Clifton, shows up reeking from booze with these 2 hookers onto the set of Taxi. I don't know, we had that photo before. Oh yeah, this is it here. Take a look at this. This is Judd Hirsch, I think, going over and saying, what the fuck is going on? We're trying to do a show here, to Tony Clifton, who's got these 2 prostitutes, legitimate prostitutes, with him. And he's yelling at the cast of Taxi, saying, let's get on with this. I'm busy. Let's go. And just completely boisterous, completely vocal, completely over the top, drunk. And that was the act. Why they loved it so much, it could be debated forever. But eventually, it will eventually run out of gas. But at this point, Andy and him are so enamored with this Tony Clifton character that they begin to write a movie called The Tony Clifton Story, which we'll get into in a second. So Tony Clifton refuses to rehearse. He wants to do the episode. And there is a legitimate episode with a legitimate script. And Judd Hirsch goes berserk. They storm out. The security shows up and begins dragging him out of the set. This is security dragging out Tony Clifton from the set of Taxi. Now, this was taken by a friend of mine named Bill Knodelseder, who wrote the book It's Funny Up There, which became a Showtime special about the Comedy Store. but he was writing for the LA Times at the time and came to cover this story at the request of Andy Kaufman's manager and to document this event because they were doing a setup. He didn't know it at the time, Canodal Seder, but Bill took this actual photo and the photos of the security dragging. This is Bob Zmuda as Tony Clifton, as Andy Kaufman, because they all believed on the set that the Clifton character was Andy Kaufman. So Kaufman had Zmuda do it and wasn't there that day. And it is Clifton, the Zmuda Clifton, that's dragged out. Now, there's a photo. I don't know if you have this photo of them working on these masks, but they brought in the top Hollywood mask designers, Zmuda, and there it is. Yeah, this photo here, just to show you how much work. And it wasn't just this event, because Clifton will be part of their world for years. They brought in the top guys to design matching outfits for the two of them, so they were impeccable and could not be separated. In fact, they wore the same costume, so the costume couldn't be different, separated as being different. If a button was popped off a shirt, it would be popped off the shirt that the other one was wearing when they wore it. But the masks and the phony stomachs and the chins and the noses and the voice, everything was rehearsed by these two maniacs. And Clifton gets kicked off the lot. In fact, George Shapiro, who was there, was yelling, "Don't hurt him, don't hurt him," because he was in on it, Shapiro. And they, didn't want him to be injured being dragged off the lot of Taxi. Well, let it be said, this was front page news in the trades, and Andy does not like being on Taxi because what he wants to do is what he just will do right now, which is April 1979. He begins to do, yeah, let's see this photo. This is George Shapiro. Don't hurt him. He's a talented man. There was audio recordings of this, by the way. Somebody taped it. I don't know if Bill Canodal Seder taped it or someone else taped it, but these are the security guards, and there's audio tape of them dragging him off with Clifton screaming at the top of his lungs, he's going to kill them all, he's going to get them and sue them, whatever, and his entire act. Okay, so what Andy, the show goes to #1, and he becomes obviously a known commodity. He will, I don't even know how to explain this. Inside, yeah, it's always your human hugs in Korea. Well, thank you, Dina from Korea. I'm glad it's working out over there for me. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, that's going to happen. Sure. On your show, Nasty Meal, on your show. Anyway, the Andy Kaufman takes a job at I don't even know how to explain this. Bob Zmuda says, we ought to get in the restaurant business. And he says, if show business pulls the plug on us, what are we going to do? And they both go, we don't know anything about the restaurant business. So Andy Kaufman says, all right, let me find out. And he takes a job at a place in Beverly Hills called Posh Bagel as a busboy. And some girl sees him there and calls up his manager and says, Andy's working here as a busboy? And his manager goes, what? That place goes out of business. Andy then goes to Jerry's Deli in the Valley in Studio City and begins working there as a busboy. And there's footage. I don't know if we have photos of this. There's photos of Andy work, and there's also a film of him working as a busboy. Nobody knows it's Andy Kaufman. He's got his hat. Yeah, take a look at this photo, because this is in Studio City. This is an actual photo taken from the screenshot, obviously, of Andy Kaufman working on his own for no reason at all, kind of like Lana Del Rey did at the Waffle House in Alabama recently. This is Andy Kaufman working as a busboy every day. Every day he would show up after Taxi and punch in a clock here. I mean, the owner, Jerry, knew he was Andy Kaufman, but nobody else did. There were Mexican. Here, this is a picture of him going in there. This is Jerry's Famous Deli. It used to be on Ventura in Studio City. It's no longer there. But a real retreat for show business folks in Hollywood. So he goes in there every day to work as a busboy. He knew Sam. Oh, he's changing his name now. Like that's going to help. Uh, anyway, Stuttering John's never getting on the show simply because he stutters. That's really the reason. Anyway, so he goes in there as a busboy and begins to work these shifts every day. He can't wait to get there. He's literally taking the bus from the set of Taxi to Jerry's Deli on Ventura. And he also feels that this will help him, he says to Zmuda, learn the restaurant business from the ground up. And Zmuda's going, all right, whatever, bro. Maybe it'll work. I don't really know. But what they really want to do is what I'm going to describe next. And this is, besides Tony Clifton, this may be the high point and SNL, but most people consider this the high point of Andy Kaufman's career. And that is April 1979, the Carnegie Hall show. And that show will feature every single aspect of Andy Kaufman's superpowers. The Carnegie Hall show in 1979 gets sold out so fast, it'll make your head spin. So he opens the show with a national anthem by Tony Clifton and a screen in the back showing the American flag, the landing at Normandy. Then all of a sudden you're seeing stormtroopers, you're seeing Hitler, you're seeing B-52s flying over. He has a group called the Love Family performing a medley from Hair and The Sound of Music. They have the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. It's just insane. The level, they bring out the Rockettes. They're dancing there. But the high point of the show is that Andy says, I told my grandmother that someday I would play Carnegie Hall. And he brings out his grandmother, whose name is Pearl Bernstein. She's the mother of Andy's mother, his maternal grandmother. And he brings out Pearl Bernstein and she says, I told you I was going to do it. And not only am I going to have you as a guest on the stage, I have flown in your couch, your actual couch, from your living room for you to sit on. So these workers bring out the couch for his grandmother on the end of the stage, not in the middle of the stage. It's all the way on the side of the stage. Oh, yeah, you can actually buy it. The legendary performance. Wow. Yeah, I highly recommend this because I don't know how much video is on there, though. Yeah, I don't know how much is visual on there. However, one of the bits after the Love Family sings and Tony Clifton sings as Zmuda. Zmuda is the producers of. Hold on. So I'm getting a little stuffed up. Oh, wow. Zmuda is the producer, the executive producer of all these events, and he is really like a showrunner for all this stuff. And one of the things they do is they show footage that Andy used to show as a kid at these kids' parties of these cowboy movies with Gene Autry, and they're singing Jingle, Jangle, Jingle. And there's a bunch of cowgirls in this 14-minute or 8-minute black and white footage. There is footage of these young cowgirls riding around on horses that are just horse heads with sticks, like a toy. And they're dancing around on the horse heads with the stick in the movie from 1928, singing Jingle, Jangle, Jingle. And Andy explains that there's only one living cowgirl alive today, and he brings her out onto the stage. She's about 80 years of age. And he says, what was it like? And she says, well, Gene Autry was amazing. It was an amazing time. And he does this little interview with this last cowgirl, Jean, whatever her name was. And he says, if I brought out one of the horses, would you show us a little bit of the moves? And she says, well, I'll try. I'm pretty old. And Andy, from backstage, they bring out one of the horse heads with a stick. and she begins to kind of hop around on the stage, and Andy has the entire orchestra. Now, keep in mind, there's a full orchestra here. Begin to play Jingle Jangle Jingle. Dun, 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 jingle jangle jingle, na, 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 and the orchestra is just booming. And he starts yelling at the old woman to go faster, pick it up. And he takes the baton from the band leader, and he begins cranking up the orchestra, playing it faster and faster and faster. And he yells at the old lady to pick it up, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. And she begins to go around faster and faster. Keep in mind, she's in her 80s. And all of a sudden, she has a heart attack and falls down onto the stage. Well, Bob Zmuda comes out and checks her. They turn on the house lights. They call for a doctor in the house. A doctor comes up from the audience and begins to check her out lying there on the stage and pronounces her dead right there on the stage. And Zmuda's in a panic. He's yelling, please turn up the house lights. He's completely freaked out, Zmuda. Andy's freaked out. He runs off the stage and he can't take it anymore. Zmuda takes his coat and puts it over the dead old lady who's laying now in the center of the stage. All of a sudden, from the side of the stage, Andy Kaufman comes back out with an Indian headdress, which I think he had from Chief J. Strongbow. This might be a little bit inside the beltway for people, but he begins to do a meditative meditative medicine dance around the body of this dead woman. The audience is now standing up in horror, yelling, somebody call an ambulance, please. And they're yelling, an ambulance is on the way. The doctor is up there. Andy is going around the dead body with an Indian chant to get her well. And all of a sudden, she sits up on the stage, and you can hear the incredible gasps by the 2,000 plus people in Carnegie Hall as she gets up and is helped to her feet by Bob Zmuda, and the entire thing had been a hoax. She's then taken off the stage, and the show continues. Near the end of the show, Andy wants to thank his grandmother, who is sitting on her couch all the way at the end of the stage. And the grandmother stands up and takes off her facial mask and wig, and it's Robin Williams. He's been sitting there on this couch doing nothing. At one point, he falls asleep. To his credit, at one point, Robin Williams does fall asleep as the grandmother, and then reveals himself at the end to be Robin Williams. Another hijinks. But the guy that Tony Clifton is playing was a real guy named Norman Wexler. Norman Wexler was a famous screenwriter from the 60s. He had written Saturday Night Fever. He had written Joe. He had written Serpico. And what Norman Wexler was known for, and what he hired Bob Zmuda to do, was for $2,000 a week, go out in the street with him and record every bit of dialogue that Norman Wexler could gather from street people. Norman Wexler was known as the best dialogue writer in Hollywood films. And he hired Bob Zmuda to go around with him. And what he did, Norman Wexler, who was the nastiest prick on the face of the earth, I think everyone would agree, he would provoke people into fights on the street so that Bob Zmuda could record the dialogue all day long, then give it to a transcriber, then transcribe the dialogue, and he would insert it into his various screenwriting projects. In one of the craziest cinema verite screenwriting things I've ever heard of, this is how Norman Wexler operated. And he became the model for this Tony Clifton character of just the nastiest prick on the face of the earth. But like I said, Andy will return to Saturday Night Live, do Pop Goes the Weasel. He will, and his numbers on SNL are through the roof. He comes back a few months later and does that. He then, this is really bizarre, he gets contacted by Kutcher's Country Club in the Catskills, and they offer him a show. And his manager says, "I don't know if Andy's right for your place. It's kind of a family audience." And Andy says, "I'll do the show if I could bring my entire family for Thanksgiving weekend." And he gets an agreement from Kutcher's Country Club, Kutcher's Hotel, to allow Andy to bring his entire family. And Andy brings his entire family, gets them up on stage. There may be some photos of this. I don't know. This there may be one of his brother and then his grandparents. They're all up on stage, and he's making them do stuff on the stage, and they're completely uncomfortable doing this, including his brother, who I think sang a cappella the entire song La Bamba in Spanish. The crowd of old Jewish people who are not there for an avant-garde show begin to storm out in mass. They will turn on the Kaufman family, literally throwing things at them and pounding on their vehicle, a limousine that was leaving in a hurry to get out of Kutcher's Hotel that Thanksgiving weekend. So that didn't really work, but Andy was overjoyed by this stuff. This is what Andy loved, was getting the audience to turn against him. Why? Nobody really got it. Very few people understood it, and even his family didn't understand it. His parents didn't understand it. People in show business didn't understand it, why you would want the audience to turn against you. There was a comedy special shot at Catch, and he plants Bob Zmuda in the audience with a microphone. Rick Newman helps him. Pat Benatar was there. A lot of celebrities were there. And Zmuda, unbeknownst to the audience, begins to heckle Andy Kaufman. They did this a lot, and he had a microphone on, and he said, "You don't have any new material. You've been doing this old stuff." And he starts to lip sync with Andy Kaufman because he knows the act as Andy's saying it, seconds before, literally milliseconds apart, to prove the point that Andy Kaufman is done, that he's old news, that he knows his routines inside and out. And he's getting heckled by other people, Zmuda, in the audience for heckling Andy Kaufman. This was their type of theater. What they got out of this, I don't know. But then Andy decides to get into wrestling. And he was always into wrestling. His grandmother, this woman I was just describing, Pearl Bernstein, who we may or may not have a picture of, would take him to the Comac Arena. For anybody who remembers the Comac Arena, I doubt if it's still there on Long Island in Suffolk County, to see professional wrestling as a kid. He was completely enamored as a kid with professional wrestling. And I mean, you know, he would wrestle his brother Michael, all that stuff, which goes with it. But he always wanted to be a professional wrestler. And he will then begin to do these wrestling stunts where he begins to challenge women to wrestle him for money. This is a still photo of one of his women's wrestling things. He declares that he's the intergender wrestling champion. He has over 400 matches with women. He does them in his live performances. He does them on TV. This is a great shot of him challenging somebody. He does it on SNL. And the thing that triggers him is that he finds out that Elvis did it. And he didn't do the wrestling. Elvis liked to have two girls wrestling in front of him in their underwear. This is one of the kinky things. And it's in Albert Goldman's book, which Andy Kaufman read and didn't like. And it was a tell-all book about a lot of the kinks that Elvis was into. One of the kinks was he was into having two girls partially nude wrestling in his abode. And Andy Kaufman begins to wrestle women, and he wrestles these women not for wrestling's sake, but as a sexual turn on. It becomes his sexual deviant behavior, where he, as he's in the clutches of these women, begins to try to seduce them. As odd as this sounds, I am telling you the truth. He would say, "Meet me after the show backstage. Let's get together." 2/3 of them would just be screaming at him, but 1/3, this is anecdotal on the part of Zmuda, 1/3 would hook up with him, and that was more than enough for Andy Kaufman. Now, Kaufman was a total sex addict. They would go to Harrah's in Reno. He did a show at Harrah's in Reno one time with Bob Zmuda, and the only reason he did the show was to go to the Mustang Ranch, which was a couple of miles outside of Reno. And he went to the Mustang Ranch, which is a bordello for people who don't know in Nevada, a legal one. And he went to the Mustang Ranch with Zmuda, who turns him onto this. And he goes in, and there's a madam there. And he says to the madam, "How many girls do you have?" And she says, "Well, total 46." And he says, "I want all 46." And he pays her for the services of all four. This is absolute true. He pays her for the services of all 46 girls for the span of the week that they're at Harrah's in Reno. And he goes every single day, and he vows to have sex. He does about 6 or 7 of them a day to complete the mission that he was on. And Zmuda can't believe it. Zmuda, meanwhile, is producing the stage show at Harrah's that he had signed up for, and that they were doing. And the wrestling continues. The wrestling goes on all over the country. Andy Kaufman, put it this way, he's on Taxi. Keep in mind, he's still on Taxi, and he gets fan mail, and he sorts out the fan mail, and he finds that through the photos, he will have tours of the country simply to meet these girls in the towns where the fan mail is coming from. Yeah, this is him in his wrestling garb. Now, Zmuda, for Saturday Night Live, Zmuda will take duct tape, and he will, underneath that black shorts, he will duct tape wrap around his entire crotch multiple times to prevent the erection from being seen on national TV. And Kaufman agrees to this, knowing that he better do something because it does happen, and they're aware of it. Now, he's dating Cindy Williams. People remember Cindy Williams, possibly from Laverne and Shirley. She is Shirley. So he is dating girls. He's dating Elaine Boozler. He's dating Cindy Williams. He's dating girls who are for real. One of them becomes Lynn Margulies. This is a picture of Lynn. She will become his girlfriend for the rest of his life. He will meet her during the shooting of a film parody, I think, of My Dinner with Andre. He makes a film called My Dinner with Fred Blassie, the wrestler, and he does it at a restaurant in the Valley called Sambo's. And he meets Margulies, whose brother is Johnny Legend, the director, but she will become part of his troupe. All of these people, by the way, who are doing these stunts with him are part of his troupe. He will bring up a girl and say, this is a segment of the show called Has-Beens of the Week. And he will find a girl who had been in the Broadway production of West Side Story, whose career didn't really take off. And on the show, he will bring her to tears because her career never materialized in Hollywood. She starts sobbing. She's in on it. All of these people that he's doing these things with are in on it. But nobody knows that. And he says his only, this is a shot. Now you could see that girl in the black tank top in the back. That's Lynn Margulies. She's sitting with her back to Fred Blassie. Fred Blassie was a very famous professional wrestler at the time. And Andy is a huge fan of Fred Blassie's, and they have lunch together. And they talk about their OCD stuff, by the way, about hand washing and cleanliness and things of that nature. Now, near the end of this film, Bob Zmuda will come over as a customer, and pull this artificial snot out of his nose and give it to Andy. And Andy will produce, he's still wearing a neck brace, which I'm going to get into in a second. We're working a little bit ahead here. But he'll come over and make believe he's a fan. These girls are plants back there. There's 4 girls who are planted back there who get an autograph from Andy. But Blassie's not in on it. And he takes out of his pocket, Kaufman, this artificial snot, and he says, "This is what I'm selling." It's prepackaged. It's like from a magic store. And Blassie like cracks up laughing, and then they talk about how one of his OCD things that Andy Kaufman has was he took the silverware in a restaurant and he dunk it in a glass of water and then dry it off with napkins. Again, part of his OCD stuff, which he does do in this, I think. But Margulis really hooks up with him here for the first time. And then before this, he's trying to find a way to expand his wrestling stuff. And he realizes the girl thing has gotten him as far as it's going to get him, even though it's gotten him tons of hooked up situations with girls, which is the whole reason he's doing this. This is a girl wrestling him. Yeah, this is kind of interesting. There were quite a few matches all over the country, but he decides to. Yeah, I wonder who that is. I think she was in on it, but many of the girls were. He wrestled a Playboy centerfold at one point. It's probably the greatest day of his life. But he feels that it's time to wrestle a man, and he hooks up with this guy in Memphis, Jerry Lawler, which people know Jerry Lawler. He was the Southern heavyweight champion wrestler of the South and a veteran professional wrestler. And Andy begins taunting this guy. They set up a match in Memphis, and Andy makes a series of videos from Hollywood saying how he's going to mop the floor with him, and he does this mock Southern accent. He says, "I am a Hollywood star. I am the biggest star in the world. I'm going to mop the floor with you." He's taunting him in the videos that are used to sell tickets until they sold out this arena. This is Andy doing a windmill, getting ready for the event. The event will not end well for Andy Kaufman. He will be lifted up by Jerry Lawler. This is the pile driver, ladies and gentlemen. For people who know wrestling, this is an illegal move in the city of Memphis and many other wrestling capitals of the world. Jerry Lawler specialized in the pile driver. And what he does is he picks you up and then he slams your head down into the canvas of the ring, which may end up causing an ambulance to show up or a gurney. This is Andy Kaufman. He's unconscious now in the ring, having been pile driven by the legendary wrestler Jerry Lawler. And they will have to bring an ambulance here. This is him being carried out in a neck brace by the EMS crew to the ambulance. Now, the crowd got so worked up into a frenzy that George Shapiro and the Kaufman people, the crew, the Kaufman following, there's 2 or 3 people, barely got out alive. So they put him in an ambulance and he's taken to a hospital. This hits the news wires. Here's the ambulance leaving the arena in Memphis. And he's taken there and examined by the doctors, and they put a neck brace on him, and he eventually leaves. And it makes all the newspapers in the country, this event. Now, this event will lead to an appearance on David Letterman. And on that appearance on David Letterman, I don't know if we have any photos of this, it was billed as Jerry Lawler was supposed to apologize to Andy Kaufman for the injuries that he did to him. And this was put on with Kaufman, and Jerry Lawler on Late Night with David Letterman. Here's Lawler on the right. In the red pants is David Letterman on the right there. In the middle is Lawler. This is Andy on the left, and you can see the two seats there. This is Andy coming to sit down. He still has the neck brace on from the injury, and he sits down there. And at Lawler, at one point, they're about to break for commercial, and he gets up and he turns around, and he's baiting him, Kaufman. He's still baiting him. And this is what happens. He hits him with an open hand slap to the head that knocks Kaufman out of his chair like a rocket over the edge onto the floor with the chair. I mean, you could hear that slap, and then complete chaos ensues. They cut to commercial. They come back. Kaufman's not there. Lawler, is saying to Letterman, he wouldn't leave me alone. He gets what he deserves. Kaufman comes back on the set, opens a tirade of foul language at Lawler that is just a bleep festival, nonstop machine gun of bleeping. This is the first shot, but he picks up a cup of coffee that's Dave's right there, that blue, hot, steaming coffee, and he throws it at Jerry Lawler. He then yells he's going to sue him for everything he's worth. And this becomes, again, this gigantic story on the front page of the LA Times, the front page of the New York Times. Huge story. And the entire event was a setup. He had hooked up with Jerry Lawler. He went down to Memphis. He went over to Lawler's house and learned how to do the pile driver in Jerry Lawler's living room. He was not hurt at all. Jerry Lawler demonstrated to Andy how they were going to do it. Professional wrestling allows you to do this. He explained, and Andy knew the rudiments of the fakery of professional wrestling. The pile driver and all of the moves were rehearsed inside of Lawler's home. This particular event was completely staged. The neck brace was put on by Andy Kaufman. The doctors found nothing wrong with him. The entire thing was faked. And when he got to Letterman, they had rehearsed the slap, him and Lawler. They knew this was going to go on. At one point, Andy says to Morton, the producer, am I taking the, on the commercial break? He says to Morty, am I taking this too far? And Morty says, no, keep it up. This is insane. And he continues to tirade Jerry Lawler. This is the type of stuff Andy wanted to do with TV. This is the type of stuff where he would show up on Letterman and there would be a storyline evolving over the months. In other words, he would show up one time as a homeless guy and said that he lost his show on Taxi, that he's now living on the street. He comes in disheveled with a beard and he's panhandling and things of that nature. And they would continue these performance art pieces with each performance that he was on Letterman. And he would do something similar with, oh, by the way, Blassie, for people at home, was a guy who coined the phrase pencil neck geek. For those of you who have ever heard the phrase pencil neck geek, that was invented by Fred Blassie. Anyway, yeah, so his brother's kind of in on it as well. He meets a guy, December 18th, before we jump ahead to that, let me see what happens here. After the Letterman show, he begins to, okay, first of all, part of his OCD is to eat chocolate nonstop during the course of the day. And I mean chocolate cake, chocolate ice cream. It's all he eats is chocolate. This was part of his OCD. I guess it's spread over into his dietary world. But him and Zmuda are trying to come up with the next thing they could possibly come up with to do for theater. And part of one of the things that Andy did was he would bring 16 millimeter projectors. Okay, I got to tell you this one. He would bring these huge old 16 millimeter and his conga drums and all these other props. But one of the things he did in performance, was he would bring these 16 millimeter projectors into the comedy club, and he would project onto this screen the Lincoln assassination. And he would say that he knows that film was in its infancy at that time, but using his money, he has found in the South like 3 minutes of the Lincoln assassination on grainy black and white film. And he would show this film of somebody, and it was indeed super old, like grainy black and white film, but it happened to be from Birth of a Nation. And people thought they were watching the Lincoln assassination. Now, Birth of a Nation was in the 19 teens, and the Lincoln assassination was 1865. But by the time Andy was done, he had the audience believing that this was footage of the Lincoln assassination. I always wanted to tell that. But Andy's obsession with Elvis, when Elvis dies in 1977, he goes back to Graceland, and he's given a private tour of Graceland, and he's taken into Elvis's private lair. Now, how do I know this? It's because I've had a private tour of Elvis's Graceland. When I ran MTV Magazine, they gave us a private tour. We were sitting in the kitchen, and Cleveland Store is my photographer for the magazine, opened the refrigerator, and there must have been 100 cans of Coca-Cola in there, Diet Coke. And we just started laughing, and this old man in a bathroom came down, started yelling at us, "Leave my Diet Coke alone." And we jumped out of our skins. And it was Elvis's uncle, Vern, who was living on the top floor of Graceland still, even though it was a tourist attraction. Anyway, so Andy goes into Graceland, and he goes into the bathroom where Elvis died, and he has a bowel movement in the toilet. He's in there for the longest time. And finally, the girl's like knocking on the door saying, "Are you all right in there?" And he says, "I am now." And he comes out after using Elvis's bathroom. He then shows him Elvis's video collection. And Elvis had a bunch of videos with Andy Kaufman's name on it. And he couldn't believe it. And the woman running the tour said, "Elvis saw every performance you have ever done as Elvis. And these are the tapes that Elvis procured of you doing him. He felt you were the greatest impersonator of him that there ever was." And Andy starts sobbing. He starts crying openly. It's like the greatest thing that ever happened to him. He really is moved by this. And his trip there was a little bit strange, and he felt that the king had faked his own death, that he would be back, and that was because it was in the Inquirer, and a lot of people. It started to become an urban myth. He does his Andy Kaufman's kid show, and he he gets a guy to show up with the Howdy Doody puppet. And he loves Howdy Doody so much that he clears the set, and he says, "I must be alone with Howdy Doody." And he comes screaming out of the set, yelling, "That's not Howdy Doody. That's not Howdy Doody." And indeed, it was not Howdy Doody. It was Photo Doody, the magazine photograph stand-in for Howdy Doody. And Zmuda flips out, yelling at the guy, saying, "We contracted the real Howdy Doody." Well, they get Buffalo Bob Smith to show up with the real Howdy Doody, and Andy's overjoyed, except that Buffalo Bob Smith is a cantankerous alcoholic who's hungover, chain smoking, and doesn't want to be there. And this is Andy's idol. This is Howdy Doody. This is Andy with actual Howdy Doody, not Photo Doody. Apparently, there's a big difference, and only Andy was able to tell. The puppet master admitted it was Photo Doody, that the real Howdy Doody rarely traveled. But they got Buffalo Bob Smith to show up, and he wasn't happy with Buffalo Bob Smith, but he was happy to finally meet his idol, who was howdy doody. I don't even know what to say. I mean, it's just as real as it is. I mean, um, meantime, he had done a film called Heart Beeps. Now, Heart Beeps comes out in 1981, December 18th, 1981. Heart Beeps is released. Now, Heart Beeps is a very strange film because he plays a robot with Bernadette Peters, who's a robot, and it's a futuristic film set in 1995. And it's directed by Alan Arkush, who's a real director. And the film is only 79 minutes long, and it's got problems. It's got so many problems that when it's released, it bombs at the box office unbelievably. This is him. They had to put, now Robin Williams will do a movie later on as a robot, but this is 1981. This makeup took 3 to 4 hours every single day with layers of metallic paint and ground up calves' hooves and all kinds of weird paste on gelatinous skin things. It really took a toll on him and may have, some people believe, affected his health, because this went on every single day for the extent for 30, 45 days of this shoot. And he's in like almost every scene as a robot. This is Bernadette here. And it's, let me tell you something, it's a real moving love story. I really enjoyed Heart Beeps. You guys could watch it and let me know. This is a cover of the movie poster. He had done a film called In God We Trust with the legendary Marty Feldman. This film was written and directed and starred Marty Feldman. It was a satire send-up of organized money-hungering religion. And Marty Feldman is this is a different film. This is God Told Me To. This is a film by Cohen. The other film, which was written by Marty Feldman, stars him as a monk who lives in a monastery who has to go out into the real world for the first time to raise money for the monastery. It's kind of like the Blues Brothers thing. And he goes to LA, which I think it might have been San Diego actually, but Peter Boyle is in the movie, and Andy Kaufman plays a evangelical, money-hungry preacher, and with a big, giant, yellow bouffant hairdo. It's kind of almost like a version of the Gemstones. Yeah, take a look at this. It's an amazing performance by Kaufman. This is where the Bible was on fire at one point. He's all through this movie. This is not a cameo. Marty Feldman, who many people know from Young Frankenstein, was huge at this time. I mean, this, here's another one. I mean, it is a spectacular, you don't even know this is Andy Kaufman in this movie. And it has its moments. It's got one of the craziest car chases I've ever seen for that level of film. Richard Pryor is in it. Richard Pryor plays God, and he meets Andy Kaufman for the first time on this movie. And he comes out of his trailer, and he runs into Andy's secretary, Linda, and he starts sobbing, Richard Pryor. And she says, "What's the matter, Richard? What is it?" And he said, "I can't believe that I've just met this genius, Andy Kaufman." And Andy Kaufman in the trailer was reading to Richard Pryor from his novel called God. And this so moved Richard Pryor that he started sobbing when he came out. And this is what Linda encountered. Now, Richard Pryor will play God in this movie. Andy Kaufman will play, I think his name was Armageddon, something like that in this movie. But wow, what a tour. But the movie Heart Beeps, because he's involved in 2 failures, and this is a failure, this movie. Heart Beeps is a failure. His movie career is over. And he is told so by these people. You only get 2 chances at movies at this level in Hollywood. They don't give you a 3rd chance because they feel there's something wrong with you in relation to the audience. They don't know what it is. They don't care what it is. All they know is that if you've been in 2 movies and they've bombed, they feel there's something wrong between your connection between the audience and yourself, and they don't care to know what that is. By the way, at this point, the transcendental meditation community kicks out Andy Kaufman because of the wrestling. They find that this is not becoming of transcendental meditation. Now, he will meditate the entire life. He never stops meditating, but the cult of transcendental meditation kicks him out. Now, this is a good one. He gets hired. Tony Clifton gets hired to open up for Rodney Dangerfield at the Fillmore West, and Bill Graham is there in San Francisco. And he comes out, and Rodney's in on this. He comes out, and he's being heckled unmercifully, Tony Clifton, by the audience, who are pelting him with bottles and tomatoes and fruit and everything else. It becomes a violent riot of them, and Kaufman is really digging it, and also Rodney loved it quite a bit. It was something that Rodney really enjoyed, because he was also in on the joke. But just from a economic point of view, all of this money that Kaufman made, he bought nothing for himself. He believed in socialism. He was not political. He just believed in the idea of having nothing. He didn't have a political bone in his body. But he made his father in charge of all his money. He rented a house in LA and didn't own anything. All of the money went to his dad. All of his money went to putting on these shows, paying the salary of Bob Zmuda, and prostitutes. That was his 3 things. He then becomes part of a show called Fridays. Now, Fridays airs February 20th, 1981 on ABC. And on this show, we had Larry Charles on. He was a writer on the show. Jack Burns was a producer on the show. And one of the sketches that they do is, maybe you could see a photo. Melanie Chardoff is in this sketch, as is Michael Richards. This is a sketch that Jack Burns and the other producer were hip to, and Andy came up with this thing. The sketch was that each of them goes in the bathroom, they smoke a joint, they come back out, and they're high and giggly at this dinner party. That's the sketch. There's Michael Richards on the right. He will be played by Norm Macdonald in the movie version, Man on the Moon, by the way, which has a lot of these odd role-playing things. This is Michael Richards standing up. Okay, let me set this up, because one by one, they're supposed to go into the men's room or ladies' room, smoke the joint, come out, and then just be spaced out and laughing like they're high. What they don't know, the other 3 players, that Andy is going to go in the bathroom, not smoke a joint, come out as if he did, all of a sudden break the 4th wall and say, I can't do this sketch anymore. This sucks. I don't want to be involved in this with the phony weed smoking. I don't really like this sketch. And Michael Richards gets up and goes in front of the camera, gets the cue cards, and throws them down on the table, which you can kind of see there. Andy Kaufman will then throw a glass of water into Michael Richards' face. Melanie Chardoff is hitting him with slabs of butter that stick to the side of his head, by the way. They are completely involved in this food fight. And now Jack Burns comes out, the producer, and he begins shoving Andy Kaufman. The crew defending Jack Burns comes out, and everyone is fighting when they go to a commercial at that time. I guess that's as close as I can explain this thing. It's at the end of the show. They come back, and the credits roll, and they're all standing around one of those group shots at the end of the show. This again makes national news, and Andy Kaufman has again demonstrated the type of art that he wants to do to break the 4th wall and do these various things on TV. He then, feels that, Fridays is someplace he can do things like this. Taxi gets canceled. His mother I think, has a stroke about that time. He's persona non grata in the film industry. The Fridays is kind of running out of gas, and there's a guy who's the producer of Saturday Night Live who discovers him, Ebersol, who decides to have a phone-in poll to see if Andy Kaufman, and they have a phone-in poll, and Andy is in on it, and he was supposed to lose and then come back a week later and apologized, a phony apology to the people, saying he'll never do it again. What he didn't realize is that Dick Ebersol, who was a dick, decided way in advance never to bring him back again because he was over this guy. He told people that he had discovered and built this Frankenstein monster and that he can destroy him. And he banned Andy Kaufman from ever being on Saturday Night Live again. Dick Ebersol was attacked by many people in the industry for this decision. So in the span of a very short time, Andy Kaufman movie career was over, Taxi was over, Saturday Night Live was over. He had a case of a complete depression because of all these different, reversals of his career, all in the span of a number of months. It was quite an interesting progression. And he really looking for something to do. And one of the things they wanted to do was the Tony Clifton story. Now, the Tony Clifton story was pitched by a guy to the movie people with Andy and Zmuda there, with George there, and with his managers there to the studios by a guy named Ed Bluestone. Ed Bluestone used to work at National Lampoon with me. And Bluestone pitched, he was a screenwriter too. So Bluestone pitches this thing, and Zmuda gets upset and says, I'm not going to write with this guy, Ed Bluestone. I don't even know him. So they give the project that this guy created. Ed Bluestone created this pitch and the treatment. They give it to Zmuda and Kaufman. And Bluestone is out, and he's furious. I've never talked to Ed Bluestone about this, but this is what happened. And Zmuda and Andy begin to work on the Tony Clifton story. But because of all these reversals in his film career, Tom Mount at Universal and the people at Universal pulled a plug on the Tony Clifton story now. So that's out. It's an amazing amount of reversals in a very, very short period of time. And in that short period of time, Andy Kaufman begins to develop a pain in his arm. And the pain in his arm becomes a cough. And he doesn't know what it is. And he's coughing a lot. And he's got this pain in his arm. And he meets a guy named Alan Abel in New York. And Alan Abel, for people who remember Alan Abel, he was the world's greatest hoaxer. And Alan Abel was such a great hoaxer. He's written like 3 or 4 books. He was a very, very famous guy in New York. He's a prankster and a hoaxer. One of the things he did was fake his own death. And the New York Times actually ran a obituary on Alan Abel. And this enamored Andy Kaufman to Alex Abel, who became his friend and wanted to know how he pulled this off, the faking of the death. And this is also in the Tony Clifton script that Andy Kaufman and Bob Zmuda wrote together, that he would fake his death and come back 10 years later. Now, this is in the script, and this is something that Andy Kaufman told my friend David Sheffield that he wanted to do when Sheffield was writing Freddie Murphy on Saturday Night Live. He told this to Sheffield, and he said, I don't want anyone else to hear about this. The only other person he ever told was Michael Kaufman, his brother. And he swore his brother to secrecy, that his brother would not tell anyone about this. Now, I was in a group called the National Improvisation Theater with Michael Kaufman. This must have been about 1984. I want to say 83, late 83, 84. We were in this group. And I knew he was Andy's brother. But you know, he was a performer along with me in this group, and it was run by huge woman. I'm digressing here for a second, but it's run by a huge woman named Tamara Wilcox, who turned out, unbeknownst to us, to be a queen bee of Scientology. And this whole group was a recruiting drive to get you into Scientology. That was the end of my involvement with the National Improvisation Theater. And Michael, I never saw after that event. But to get back to this coughing, Lynn takes Andy to a doctor in Beverly Hills, and it turns out the coughing is because he has a tumor next to his lung that is blocking his breathing. And he is told that he has inoperable cancer. And he presumes that to mean that it's inoperable, so I can live with it. Again, people do a lot of weird denial stuff. He believes that it's the phrase inoperable to him. He believes that means that he can get radiation therapy, manage this. Now, keep in mind, this is a complete vegan. This is a guy who does yoga, does meditation, is a health freak, doesn't smoke. However, he does do all of these things when he's Tony Clifton. He smokes nonstop. He drinks bourbon. He eats red meat as Tony Clifton. But sometimes Bob Zmuda is Tony Clifton, who doesn't mind doing it. So this illness he is told, despite his denial, that he has 4 months to live. And this is right at Cedar Sinai here in Beverly Hills. The only person he tells is his brother, Michael Kaufman. And he swears them to secrecy because he feels that he's going to live. And he doesn't want to disturb his parents. So he tells Michael not to tell his parents, and they don't tell anybody. And I don't even know how to explain this. There's a thing called psychic surgery in the Philippines. And psychic surgery is kind of misnamed because it's really a guy palming chicken gizzards and blood in a sponge, and they would run it on your body and make believe they were pulling it out of you. Now, if this is you, you know that your body hasn't been penetrated by anything. So I don't know how you could fake out the person. But Andy and Bob Zmuda, this is Andy there, but take a look at the actual footage. There's actual photos of the surgery that I found that I wanted to share with you people at home. This is Andy Kaufman in the Philippines being operated, quote unquote, on by a charlatan who is pulling the cancer out of his head. And in a couple of shots, there's another shot I wanted to show you after this. This is, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, this is the blood and chicken gizzards that they've pulled out of his chest. This is blood in that bowl. He's paying a lot of money for this. Bob Zmuda is beside himself. He doesn't know why. They don't know why Andy agreed to do this, because he must have known, as they did, that this was a fraud. This was a hoax. And maybe in some twisted drama in his mind, he wanted to do this as part of the hoax. Anyway, the Fred Blassie movie opens at a theater, the New Art, I think, here in Beverly Hills. And this is a photo of Andy showing up for the premiere. He has a mohawk. I think we may have the photos of him in a mohawk. That's him emaciated, talking to a wrestler who showed up for the premiere. And he literally has a month to live at this point. There might be a couple of other photos. Yeah, he had lost his hair, but he saved enough to make a mohawk down the middle or glue some of it on or something. But everyone knows in Hollywood that something's wrong with him, but they don't believe him. This is one of the most bizarre moments in show business history. There is no empathy in the show business community for Andy Kaufman because they believe he's faking it. They believe he's lost all this weight intentionally to fake his own death. Everyone believes this. They believe that he's paid the doctors at Cedars to say this privately. The family, even they don't believe it. They believe that this is part of him starting to do this fake death thing. And why would they think that? Because he told these people 2 years before that he was going to do this, including his own manager. Zmuda said, please don't tell me this anymore. I don't want to know about it because it's a felony to fake your own death. And he says, what do you mean? He says, well, insurance money is going to kick in. Things are going to happen. And I don't want to be part of it. So Zmuda kind of bails out on this phony death thing. They all believe, including the cast of Taxi, including his close friends, they believe in one of the most bizarre moments in Hollywood history. Now, keep in mind, this is, I want to say, May of 1984. And Michael in my class disappears to go be with his brother. And he said that I'm going to either, I thought it was Mexico, but it might have been the Philippines. Although he might have gone to Mexico also because he was trying out other alternative medicines. In fact, I think he tried out every single alternative medicine there was. And that included crystal healing and every sayings and things of that nature, and fasting and not fasting and everything you could possibly come up with. Andy tried every alternative thing possible. In the meantime, they were giving him radiation therapy, and he was doing that up until his last days at Cedars when Zmuda goes up there. And Andy Kaufman passes away, sadly, on May 16th, 1984, my birthday, which I'll never forget because it was my birthday. He is at the funeral, people didn't even believe he was dead. It's just one of these bizarre things because of who he was. Cut to a year later to the day. I think it was May 16th, 1985. There is this is them loading his casket into the thing. Everybody was at this funeral, but nobody believed it was real. Here's a paper, the LA Times. Offbeat comic dies of cancer. The obituaries are real. But I think people, and this is taken back east. He's brought back to Long Island, and this is his grave marker there, May 16th, 1984. The family was besides themselves. I mean, the only one who knew was Michael Kaufman, and he was sworn to secrecy. A year after it, to the day, word started to spread that Tony Clifton would be appearing at a comedy club in LA, and there was a full-page ad in Variety. And people started freaking out, saying, it's Andy coming back. He did it. And it was Tony Clifton. Bob Zmuda showed up as Tony Clifton. And people were completely freaked out. He was the headliner. There were other performers that night who performed, other big name comics. And they turned out to raise money for cancer awareness. And this became, in the years to come, Comic Relief, which was produced for all those years by Bob Zmuda and featured Billy Crystal and Whoopi Goldberg and Robin Williams. It started that night in its infancy, a year after the death of Andy Kaufman, as Tony Clifton came and performed as the headliner, and people were completely spooked. But it was Bob Zmuda. Now, Over the years, there have been rumors and sightings of Andy Kaufman in Albuquerque, New Mexico. There's some photos of him, the people that say it's Andy Kaufman. I don't know if that's true. It would be, obviously a much older Andy Kaufman. He said that he would wait 10 years till he came back. But other people said they've heard 20 years, they've heard 30 years. On his deathbed, he told Bob Zmuda 4 words: chocolate has killed me. He was obsessed with the fact that he read the book Sugar Blues, which I had read. I recommend it to everyone. Came out in the late 80s, I think, and it talked about the deadly effect of sugar in our diet. And once he read Sugar Blues, he felt that he was a dead man, because he had consumed so much sugar through the chocolate that he ate nonstop, and I mean nonstop. Chocolate layer cake, chocolate ice cream, bowls and bowls of it. Obviously, it had an eating disorder of some sort, but one of the greatest performers of all time, and I mean that pound for pound. Woody Allen said he met with him for lunch one time and couldn't communicate with him. Nobody could really, in show business, communicate with him on a intimate level. They don't know if he was autistic. They don't know if he was a savant. They don't know if he was putting them on. They didn't know if he was retarded. Nobody could get through on an intimate level to Andy Kaufman. He may just had a stunted emotional growth and was stunted at the age of 11 or 13-ish. But clearly this had a childlike persona that we will probably never see again. The closest thing I think would possibly be Robin Williams, who was his protege, and they did have a mentor-protege relationship. One of the most interesting men in comedy, in my opinion, Andy Kaufman, was dead at the age of 35. And that was kind of why it was shocking as well, that he was so young. And for someone to pass now, the doctors at Cedars said that it was genetic, and that his grandfather had the same type of cancer. So there may be some truth to that. But his grandfather died in his 60s, and Andy died at 35. Wow, what an incredible loss at such a young age. It really rocked everyone at the time. It really was a huge story. I mean, keep in mind, Elvis had abused drugs. He had bloated and blah, blah, blah. And people who died of overdoses, and there was an explanation, and they weren't young and healthy like he was. But wow, just an incredible loss. Anyway, if you have any questions about it, now would be a good time to ask or raise any questions. I could see if I can answer them, because it's such a complicated, long life. Someone showed him your video. No, we're not going to do. We don't do relatives of the dead people. Sorry. Thanks, Ugly Pack Squirrel Ghoul. Thanks for the $4.99 though, but we don't do relatives. Anyway. The movie Man on the Moon, which you see here, Jim Carrey, it's an amazing performance. I got to say, I'm not really a big fan of Jim Carrey, but this was directed by Milos Forman, who did Amadeus. This stars Courtney Love as Lynn Margulies, by the way. And Paul Giamatti plays Bob Zmuda. Giamatti, of course, the son of Bart Giamatti, who was the president of Yale, and also the commissioner of baseball of Major League Baseball, which I am going to watch tonight as we take on whoever we're taking on. Yeah, Melanie Chardoff was a babe. I thank you, Al, for pointing out the obvious. Nobody believed Kaufman was dead. Yeah, I know it was hard to believe. The multiple factors did it. The age did it. The fact that he talked about doing it. The fact that he hooked up with Alan Abel. who did do it. There's just a lot of factors involved here. Clifton was nasty. Man on the Moon was a great movie. By the way, Man on the Moon was produced by Giamatti. Was great. Man on the Moon was produced by Danny DeVito. And Paul Giamatti was great. The whole movie's great. Sideways is his best movie, and he's been in a few good ones. I don't know about that. We don't know what to do with that with this show today. But who manages Andy's estate? I think the family does. The brother, I assume, because his brother came out about these hoaxes. Apparently Andy, the daughter that Andy had in high school with the girl who was in high school, gave it up for adoption. She came out of the woodwork a number of years ago and said she was Andy Kaufman's daughter, which was true. I don't know where that went. And then his brother has come out saying that these hoaxes about him being alive were hoaxes, but it was almost tongue-in-cheek, as if Michael, who did perform with him and did do different things, was trying to perpetuate the hoax. So I don't really know. It's hard to delineate where Michael fits into the whole thing. But I know he was a performer because I was in this thing with him. So if you like this and want to subscribe, there's no one who's going to stop you at this point. I can only say this is a good time to do it. Like, subscribe, and we'll love you. Yeah, Roger Ebert, not a fan. And as for the mental illness, some people believe he had multiple personality disorders, which may have been true. I don't know if that's true. I'm not, obviously, we'll never know now, but he was examined by psychiatrists as a young kid. So there might have been something there. I don't know if the thing with the grandfather set him over the top, but he had everything a kid could possibly want: a very stable household, a stable family, upper middle class upbringing. I don't know. Maybe he damaged himself with drugs and alcohol, but he functioned and did all these incredible things. And he was a doll. He was an absolute doll. Alan, thank you. I don't know if you ever got to see Andy Kaufman perform. Probably saw it on Saturday Night Live like the rest of us. I never got to see him live, but just because it was just out of my range at that point, geographically. But most of his stuff was done at Catch, and then out here at the Improv, the club stuff, and then the rest of it becomes TV. But yeah, the wrestling thing, it really started to get on people's nerves. He alienated, just like Dice, and also Sam, the community of women out there. And even though they may have been told that this is a put on, it doesn't work with women. And again, this has really been a negative mark on his career. The wrestling really hampered his career, as did the obsession with Tony Clifton. His management told him to get rid of Tony Clifton. He was just obsessed with Tony Clifton. And I don't know what else to say. Thank you, Metamorphosis. He's a very, very complicated person. And, it's hard to explain his whole career. I mean, I've read everything that's out there about Andy Kaufman, of course. I've seen all the documentaries, of course, and all the movies, of course. Pee-wee's Playhouse, Pee-wee came to him for permission to do Pee-wee's Playhouse. And he granted Pee-wee, Rubens, the permission to do Pee-wee's Playhouse. Bill Murray's Nick the Lounge Singer, that was granted with permission from Andy to the writers of the Lounge Singer that Bill Murray created. That was Tony Clifton as well. They also got permission from Andy to do the Blues Brothers. These two characters who stayed in character the entire time. The Blues Brothers was also a derivation of Andy's type of characters. They got permission from him to do this stuff. So the track record of his characters, his type of theater going forward is fairly well documented, because they actually asked permission and acknowledged that they were doing similar things. You know, what's his name? Bud Friedman, the owner of the Improv, when he wanted to clear out the crowd at the end of the night, Andy would come out and read The Great Gatsby in a British accent. And that apparently, the milk and cookies thing from Carnegie Hall, which is really so fascinating, how they had like 24 buses or 22 school buses outside Carnegie Hall, and they took everyone to a school for milk and cookies after the Carnegie Hall show. And there might be a couple of photos of that from Carnegie Hall after the show. Andy went with them. Zmuda went with them. They went to a school cafeteria, and they gave everyone milk and cookies. Now, they also promised to continue the show the next morning at the Staten Island Ferry. Zmuda overslept. Kaufman overslept. They had to race down there a half an hour thinking nobody would buy this. They didn't believe anybody would be there. And when they showed up at the dock of the Staten Island Ferry, there were 300 people from the night before, and they did a miniature show. They didn't get on the ferry. They did a miniature show for them at the Staten Island Ferry, and this was the people from the show the night before. Just to talk to Roger a little bit, to explain the details of that situation afterwards. Take a look at this. This is Andy drinking milk at the Milk and Cookies event after the show. He had done it in California. He had done it out here. They took him to the Spaghetti House, which was a restaurant on Sunset. They had done this once before on the West Coast in LA. But that was a dry run for this event. You could see him eating some of the stuff here. It's very interesting how they pulled this off without a hitch. Just an amazing, amazing night. Like I said, probably the pinnacle of his career was the Carnegie Hall thing. Okay, now I realize a lot of television shows that I have seen. Yeah, in some way, absolutely. That's what I was getting at, Rose. Yeah, his legacy lives on through these homages that people have done, with credit or without credit. To acknowledge his career. He had a huge influence, but a lot of it is uncredited, because it was done behind the scenes. With various people acknowledging it years later that they got permission to do it. Okay, anything here? Looks like it's in I think that's about all we've got today, except for our sponsor, which is this incredible coffee. I just wanted to tell you about this. This tribal coffee, which is the coffee that you could get in the Philippines if you're going for psychic surgery and you're in a hurry and you need a boost. You get 10% off for psychic surgery coffee with the code Mark G for tribal coffee. It's somehow put together. That's the Biltong code, but the tribal coffee code surprisingly might be the same. This coffee is put together by pygmies in Papua New Guinea through the volcanic ash of the a volcano that is nearby in Papua New Guinea. I don't know how they did it. It's kind of a freaky thing, but it is the best coffee I've ever had. It's delicious. It's smooth. It has no bitterness. Doesn't taste burnt. It is something that you should really try. One bag. Try one bag and you'll be hooked for the rest of your life on tribal coffee. It also comes from the same family as the Biltong family that are putting out the king of all Biltong. Anton also has the coffee. So you'd be helping him out with his family down in Texas. These are the two products that he puts out. They sponsor this show. We use both the Biltong and the tribal coffee to produce the show. And a lot of people seem to like it. They tell me they're buying it, which I find incredibly exciting that somebody's doing something that I said. But I get it and I love it. And that's That was Andy Kaufman's dream, to get the audience to boo him, by the way. Anyway, next week, I don't know. I'm working on a few things. We're definitely going to have a show. It's to toss up as to who the hey, what's up, Mike? Maybe the audience can vote as to who they want to see in the comment section down below, or in the comment section here, about who we're going to get to next. We're going to do all these people. I'm not doing the relatives of the people, but I am doing the actual people. We will do Jonathan Winters, of course. We will do Michael Richards. We will do, I don't know about Norm Macdonald, but we will do Jackie Gleason. Definitely, we're doing Gleason. Trying to do a little bit of the Amazing Jonathan. No, I don't think that's going to happen. We are going to do Jerry Lewis. We are going to do Alan King. We're going to get into Henny Youngman, who I knew. We're going to do, Jerry Seinfeld, as I said at one point. We're going to do a lot of the people that you've seen. We're going to do Gary Shandling, I believe, The Secret Life of Gary Shandling, which definitely Bill Hicks. We're going to do Bill Hicks, of course. We're going to get them all, but it's only one a week, so it's going to take the rest of my fucking life to do this. But we'll do Lenny Bruce, Nick Hexum, who I ran into on a plane. I don't know if we're going to do Nick Hexum, but we're going to do a lot of people that you've heard of. Myron Cohen, I don't think so. Kennison Smack Dealer, if he's still alive, I mean, that would be great. Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's Dangerfield I've done already. So yeah, we're going to have a lot of them. Did I mention Robin? Yeah, we're going to do Robin. It's probably a list of 100 that I have somewhere. Myron Cohen. Yeah, rock stars, Martin. Nah, it's kind of been done to death, bro. That's Paul Butterfield, who I love. We're probably going to do George Hamilton. We're going to get into some people like that. SNL alumni. I don't think of anyone offhand. We're going to do Belushi, that's for sure. Definitely doing John Belushi. I knew his wife, and there's some connection to Lampoon there. Bob Newhart. I don't think there's anything about Bob Newhart I don't know. As for my own life, it's quite well documented on America's Untold Stories in multiple episodes. Bert Convy, I highly doubt that. Rupert Pupkin, of course, worked with that. Is rumored to have faked their. Who else have you worked with and rumored to fake their own death? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the upside of faking your own death is. It does create a lot of legal problems. London Lee, and there's a lot of people out there that we're going to get to. Slash, I don't think so. I know too many secrets about Slash. Jackie Mason, definitely on the list. I knew Jackie Mason is definitely on the list. So we're going to get into that. But look, I got to get ready. I got games to watch. I got things to do here. This is all very interesting, but it's not getting my shirts made any faster. And we're going to do Carl Reiner. We're going to do Mel Brooks. Pee Wee Herman. I mean, really, it's been done so many times. I'm trying to do some that are not as the Belushi one. We're going to definitely do. Yeah, we're going to do that one. All right, let me get out of here because I can't take it anymore. Maybe we could play this theme exit music, and the two books on Kaufman are behind me. If you want to see this, that book by Zmuda, and then there is the Bill Zemi book by the New York Times writer. Those are two of the main books. Liberace, not in my wheelhouse. Have a great day.